Hello, I'm Roger Bisby and welcome to another one of my city walks. Today I'm dealing with a fairly unusual subject really for city walks, and that is dealing with London's dead. At one time we buried the dead in churchyards, everybody within God's great gaze. But as the space ran out and the population grew, what to do with London's dead became more and more urgent. For a while they piled up bodies upon bodies, opened up the grave and just kept piling them in. And they also put bodies above ground, and that's fairly common in countries where the cities are built on hard rock and digging down is impossible. You see what amounts to multi-storey car parks full of the dead. And of course you could only do that if you were rich. What happened to the poor? Well, sadly, a lot of them were just thrown into pits, thrown into heaps, some of them even into the River Thames, anything to get rid of them. And in the crypts of churches, bodies piled up, and the ground level around churches actually rose. As the bodies were buried and the ground was put back, you saw a distinct rise in the ground between where the church is and where the street is below. And of course there was also the problem of contamination, because if you bury bodies and you don't bury them very deeply, what's going to happen? And there were also cases of the decomposing bodies leaching out into the water supply. We had contaminated wells in Aldgate, which led to several deaths, and also another one down at Aldwych, but there were others. So not only was it a social problem, it was a health problem. And in the end, the answer was to build cemeteries around the perimeter of London. And these have now become known as the Magnificent Seven. 7 cemeteries dotted around to deal with London's dead, to take them out there on a horse-drawn hearse or any other way you could manage to get those bodies out there and bury them in these graveyards. So I'm going to take you to one of those graveyards, or maybe two. It's Highgate Cemetery. So that's where I'm off to now. And as I slog my way up the hill to Highgate Cemetery, I'm going to drop in on one or two other interesting little places which have got a strong connection with the story. And this is Bunhill Cemetery, which is thought to have been derived from Bunhill. And in the city of London, as the city grew, there were lots and lots of bodies to be buried. And it was illegal to cremate bodies in those days, so they had to be buried somewhere. This one, apparently, there are something like 123,000 graves in this place, which means they're tightly packed in. There must be bodies on top of bodies. And this practice of putting bodies on top of bodies was known as attrition burial. They would bury the body, leave it for about 5 years, and then obviously the flesh had decomposed by then, and then they could just dig the ground up, put another body inside. So there was a kind of strict rota. The guys doing the job, burying the bodies, knew when they buried them, and therefore they would be able to say, well, okay, 5 years has passed, let's go back to that row there and bury some more. But it's also a non-conformist cemetery. So if you were outside the Church of England, you were buried here. You couldn't be buried in a church graveyard. And it wasn't easy being a nonconformist in those days, because the government persecuted you. Daniel Defoe, who's buried here along with William Blake, they were both nonconformists, they were both radicals. Daniel Defoe was put in prison, and also they were just given a hard time for being abolitionists and troublemakers. Anyway, it's been preserved by the City of London as a very nice open space. You can come and eat your lunch here and sit among the happier dead, as William Blake once said. And of course, one of the reasons why this dealing with the dead was so urgent is because we didn't have cremation. Cremation was actually only formally legalised in the early 1900s. I'm standing in St Pancras Old Church, which is just up the side of St Pancras Railway Station. But before the railways came, this graveyard, this cemetery, was much bigger. And because the Midland Railway wanted to bring their tracks all the way into St Pancras Station, they had to get rid of some of the graveyard. And that meant that they had to move the bodies and rather respectfully they took the gravestones, the headstones, and stacked them all up. This was quite common practice when a graveyard was repurposed. That's what they did. They moved the headstones around the perimeter of the graveyard. And this job was actually given to Thomas Hardy, the famous novelist. He was training as a young architect in London at that point, and they gave him the job of supervising. I don't suppose he actually moved many gravestones himself. Here is a tree which you can see just nestled in among the gravestones. At one time that tree was obviously fully grown, and that's where Thomas Hardy decided that the gravestones needed to be stacked against. So the tree's kind of gone, but the gravestones remain. O passengers, pray list and catch our sighs and piteous groans, half stifled in this jumbled patch of wretched memorial stones. We late lamented, resting here, are mixed to human jam, and each to each exclaims in fear, I know not which I am. We are huddled, none can trace, and if our names remain, they pave some path or porch or place where we have never lain. Now, another reference here, if you're a fan of Charles Dickens, one of his best books as far as I'm concerned is A Tale of Two Cities, and he does mention St Pancras Old Churchyard a couple of times in that novel. So now I'm in Highgate Cemetery, the biggest of the Magnificent Seven, those 7 cemeteries that they built around London, and by far the most crowded and by far the most ornate. There obviously was a lot of money here. People were getting buried, family tombs. Not a cheap exercise in those days. I mean, my personal view of the whole thing is that different cultures treat death differently. In some countries they go and have a picnic on the grave once a year, what they call the Day of the Dead, where they all go out and sort of commune with their ancestors. And that seems like quite a nice idea to me, and as they get up and walk away, they turn around and wave. But from my point of view, and it's only a personal feeling, I think when you're dead, and it's the same as when you have never been born. Either side of your short life is nothing. But people like stories. They like to make up stories to make them feel more comfortable, to make them feel that there's some kind of purpose in being on this earth. So what I've decided I'm going to do with my body is I've donated it to medical science, and they can chop it up and have a look around, and I've even given them permission to film because I like the idea of doing my last video when I'm dead and gone. Anyway, the thing is, it saves having a funeral, because I think that half an hour on the conveyor belt where you have somebody standing up there and reading a load of stuff about you that is probably not even true, or they have no personal contact with you anyway. The other thing about donating your body to medical science is that they need these bodies. The students have got to practice on something. I mean, when they do their first hip operation, for example, it's better if they do it on a dead person and practice rather than just going straight to a live one. So all kinds of other things they do, research and all the rest of it. And back in the day when, you know, early Victorian times, you know, Charles Dickens talks about the grave robbers, what they called the resurrection men. Those stories of them coming in the middle of the night and digging bodies up and carting them off to the medical schools and the hospitals and places where they were carrying out medical research, and the lecture theatres. There are still a few of those. There are still about 3 of those in London, those round theatres where they all sit there and get a lecture in how to cut up a body or do something else. But it's very important that we just carry on researching and finding out what's possible. And if you think about where we are now, where people look at a hip operation or a knee operation as routine, and even a kidney transplant is not unusual these days. So all that kind of thing is very important. It's important for the living. Once you've done your best on this planet, if you can do a little bit more on your way out, then it might help to atone for some of the sins, some of the bad things we did in life. Not that I did any bad things, of course.
Hello, how you doing?
Skill Builder viewer, hello, what's your name?
I'm Jordan.
Jordan, hiya Jordan.
Hiya.
You're working over there, are you?
Yeah.
You just spotted me, that was good. I'm just doing a little bit on the mosque, funnily enough.
Oh, right.
Do you know who was one of the movers and shakers behind getting that built?
No.
Winston Churchill.
Oh, really?
And people go, oh, bloody racist, Winston Churchill, but in actual fact he did it.
Yeah, because we're conservation.
Oh,
so
are
we
you?
we do sort of conservation. So we do pointing here, we done line pointing out the back.
Oh, blimey, are you doing it now?
Not lime today, we're pointing cobbles.
Yeah,
But,
oh right, okay. Now this is one of the 7 cemeteries, the Magnificent 7, and it's Brompton Cemetery, which is in West London. And I really like this cemetery. It's probably my favourite one actually. Highgate's bigger, but this has kind of got a nice feel about it, hasn't it? There's a lot of people buried here. Now Beatrix Potter used to live just round the corner here, and as she came through the cemetery she noticed certain graves and Nutkins and people like that, and she took the names from the graves to use in her stories, thereby immortalising them even better than they would be in stone. So there's a lot of notable people buried here as well. So this goes back to the 1800s. And it's one of the few cemeteries you can actually cycle through. You don't have to pay to get in. The family tomb. I'm not sure I'd have a family tomb even if I was going to get buried, because I'm not sure my family would want to put up with me for eternity. Probably 70, 80 years or whatever I'm going to have on this earth is enough for them. They wouldn't want to be banged up with me after that. Probably think, oh, thank God we got rid of him. That's lovely, isn't it? Little walkway. All the cemeteries and graveyards I've shown you so far have been north of the River Thames, but this one is on the south side, just by London Bridge, and this would be Southwark. And this was really outside the pale. It was not a respectable area. This is where people came to frequent brothels, get drunk and have a high old time or a low old time. And here we have Crossbones Graveyard. Now, this wasn't exactly a graveyard in the way that you might imagine with headstones and all the rest of it. This was just basically a pit. And this is where they buried the people who supposedly weren't worthy of being buried in the churchyard. So you would have had prostitutes, you would have had children, drunks, all kinds of vagabonds, thieves, all thrown in here, kept outside of the church's jurisdiction. Except for one thing, and that was that the Bishop of Winchester, who had a palace just up the road here, he had his London residence and he had his place in Winchester, and he was given permission by the king to collect taxes from the brothels. So he lived off these, what you might call immoral earnings back in the day, but he didn't want them buried in the churchyard. And once again, we get let down by the men of the cloth. They're quite willing to live off these, what they called immoral earnings back in those days, but they didn't want them buried in their churchyard. And these ladies were called the Winchester geese because they provided the Bishop of Winchester with a nice little bounty. Not for the first time in this story, or the last, we see the hypocrisy of the church. And this graveyard is reckoned to hold the remains of 15,000 men, women and children who lived in this notoriously lawless part of London.
Okay, just for a while.
Yeah, hello.
I know it's done.
Thank you very much. And you. Just a little bit of recognition from a skill builder viewer. It's so funny, really. Just people saying hello all the time. They're always nice. People are always nice. So this is it. This is the tribute from people who identify with the marginalised in society, maybe your LGBT and so on, and just generally local people who feel that this place needs to be acknowledged and celebrated in some way. I'm standing on the edge of Spitalfields Market, which is a lovely area. A lot of people enjoying the sunshine, having lunch and just chilling out. And they probably aren't, a lot of them aren't even aware of this and the history of this place. But what I'm standing on top of here on this piece of glass is what was a charnel house. It was a cemetery, it was a catastrophe cemetery, and it dates back to Roman times when they were doing the excavations to build this building next to me. They found the Roman remains of burials and all kinds of men, women and children in there, but also a lead coffin with a Roman princess, for want of a better word, somebody very important, somebody very wealthy, who was buried in there in a very ornate coffin. So that caused a great stir. They were excited about that. That is now in the Museum of London, which is closed at the moment, but will reopen. And when they dug this up, they discovered that what they think were a huge number of bodies which are buried. They haven't even begun to really excavate this, they can't now. But this bit here suggests that there were hundreds, thousands of bodies buried down here. And this is what they call a charnel house. So when you're digging in the grounds and you're burying a body, you come across another one, you respectfully take that out, you stack all the skulls up, all the bones up, and that's ready for the afterlife. And you put more bodies in its place. So that's what they call attrition burial. But what they also found is that there were so many bodies here that they thought, no, this is more than attrition. This is a catastrophe cemetery. This is here because some big event happened. Now you think of that, you know, you suddenly get a load of dead people and you think of the plague. But radiocarbon dating told them that it wasn't the plague. It was a catastrophe cemetery, but it was something else that caused it. And it was in the 1300s. So they look back and they think, okay, what happened then? So they found by doing core samples from ice that there was a massive period of cold around the 1300s. And that was due to a volcano in Indonesia that covered Europe and a lot of Asia in an ash cloud and produced 3 winters. So if you think back, in the 1300s, you didn't have stores of food like you have today. And even today, if we had an ash cloud, we had winter, 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 spreading out over 2 years, a lot of people would starve to death. There would be a great shortage of food. And it was also very cold. So a lot of people died, and they know that they died of starvation because they looked at the teeth and they got little annular rings around the teeth, and that suggests malnutrition. So thousands and thousands of bodies were stacked up here due to that famine. So this is the charnel house. The bodies would have been buried elsewhere, and then they would have been brought in here. And they just left them there because they thought it was important in medieval times that you kept your skeleton. You couldn't go to heaven, you couldn't move around in heaven unless you had a proper functioning skeleton, they thought. Didn't matter about the flesh, but the skeleton was important. And because they stacked all the skulls up in one place, all the legs and all the arms in different places, I thought, okay, so what do we do? God will work that out. God knows which one goes with which one. He's a clever bloke, isn't he? So this was going to be built over all the way, but the internet saved it because they were building this office space. I think this one's built by Sir Richard Rogers, the architect, and they were going to build out all over here, but because of the internet, they didn't then need the trading space. So they pulled back, and so the building finishes rather abruptly on the edge of this, on a couple of piers, and it's all supported over huge great steelwork underneath. But they preserved it, which is great, and it's not open unfortunately to the public except maybe the occasional time, and also during a week of the London Dead, when you can go around all these different crypts and look and fill your boots basically with morbid curiosity. Now, despite all their best endeavours in building those magnificent 7 cemeteries and countless other cemeteries, they still were running out of space, due largely to the great increase in London's population, and things became desperate. So what did they do? So the answer was, and still is to some extent, Brookwood Cemetery out near Woking. And this is a beautiful bit of land which was doing nothing. There was no village here or anything like that. And they thought, if we can bury the London's dead out there in the countryside, that will solve the problem. Now, this was only really possible because of the advent of the railways, because it's a fair distance away. So what they built was a purpose-made station up near Waterloo Station, and the Necropolis line, which basically took the existing Woking line and then had a branch off to Brookwood. And this train that carried the bodies from London down on this funeral train was known as the Necropolis Railway. You could buy a one-way ticket and be buried in this beautiful cemetery. So obviously the family came with you and they accompanied the coffin down on the train, And the problem was soon identified by the then Bishop of London, who said, no, we can't have the hoi polloi, the unwashed, mixing with the better class of people. We must segregate this train out so you could get a third class ticket or you could get a first class ticket. And in order to stop those people mingling when the coffins arrived here at the station, they had two separate stations. So you'll see one down where the Pancras Graveyard is, and you'll see another up here in the more salubrious and select graveyards that we have here. And also there are a number of different segregated areas for Muslims and for all kinds of other people, because even today they don't allow cremation in their religion. So it's become something of a desperate plight for them to find a place to be buried. So the other way that people have got over this, if they come from other countries and live here, is they have their body flown home. And just up the road here at Heathrow Airport, there is a shipping agent who specialises in shipping bodies home to the countries of their origin. So maybe that's the answer for them. A lot of people save up, they put money into a fund all through their life to give themselves that last flight home and a burial among the people that they left so long ago. So this raised embankment that is flanked by these redwood trees was originally part of the old railway line that came all the way through Brookwood Cemetery, and it was all managed by the London Necropolis Company. So the ticket for the coffins were priced at £1 for the first class, which is quite a lot of money then, and 2 shillings and 6pence, which is equivalent to about 12.5p now, for the third class. I don't know what happened to the second class, whether the second class was in there or not. It seems a bit strange to go from first to third, but anyway. During the busy period, which was 1894 to 1903, when they decided to bring in cremation, I reckon, over 2,000 bodies a year were transported by the railway, and trains left Waterloo daily at 11:40 and returned at 3:30. So it gave the mourners enough time. I mean, that's certainly more time than you get today, isn't it, on the conveyor belt. So this is what remains of the old railway platform, the railway line. You can see just the edge of the platform there. And they would have stopped the train here, delivered the coffin into the chapel. I'm not quite sure what they did. If they brought several coffins down at once, people would obviously have to wait in the train until it was their turn to go in and have their service. So that was brilliant. I just met a nice fella. He's actually a Greek Orthodox monk, and this is the monastery. And he was just telling me that this was built on the site of the old railway station, which was burned down in 1970 something, and they saw that it had a footprint basically, so they didn't need planning permission, so they gathered the money up, crowdfunded it, and managed to buy the plot. Anyway, it's a great meeting centre for them, not just to bury the dead, but for social life and get together. There's a certain style of architecture that prevails with a lot of these cemeteries, isn't there? Solid, very, very solid. It's that great store by Brickwork. So there you are. I hope you enjoyed my little day among the dead as much as I did. And let me know what you think, because I wouldn't imagine that this video is going to get a great many views. It's not exactly clickbait, is it? I'm going to have to think of a snappy title.